Two children were busy playing a game, blissfully unaware of the shadowy shapes that flitted outside the sliding glass door. The world beyond was a graveyard of humanity, overrun by zombies for the past 6 years. In this post-apocalyptic wasteland, the brother and sister had accomplished the near impossible, surviving alone in a secluded villa for the entire duration. Few others had managed such a feat. The dangers they faced on a daily basis were beyond what most could even imagine. One afternoon, a pickup truck rolled up the driveway. A man and woman stepped out. Jim, the boy, greeted them with what appeared to be a toy gun clutched in his hands. Without so much as a hello, the man asked bluntly, "Where are your parents?" Jim kept his lips pressed together, offering no reply. The man simply smiled faintly and said, "See you next time." That night, Jim and his sister went around securing every door and window, locking them as tightly as possible. Outside, a few zombies lingered in the darkness, silently waiting for an opening. Morning came, and miraculously, the siblings were unharmed. Checking the magazine of his so-called toy gun, Jim revealed it wasn't a harmless plaything after all. As the siblings resumed their usual outdoor games, the same truck returned. This time, the couple's demeanor had hardened. Again, they asked, "Where are your parents?" Jim lied smoothly, claiming they had gone to town to gather supplies. But the couple weren't fooled. The woman pointed out that the nearest town was several hours away and smiled as if she knew the truth. She offered to stay and protect the children until their parents returned. Upon seeing the well-stocked pantry, running refrigerator, and secure home, the couple quickly decided to make themselves comfortable. The man introduced himself as Jack, then announced he would move the truck to a hidden spot, clearly worried about someone finding them. It was obvious they were avoiding detection. Later that night, Jim overheard their whispered conversation. They spoke as though they'd already claimed the villa as their own. Cautiously, Jim and his sister slipped into their hidden safe room, the very place that had ensured their survival for years. By the next morning, Jack was cooking breakfast, acting like the master of the house. Jim remained composed but made a curious remark, "It will be over before you know it." When night fell, Jim suddenly asked his sister, "Is it time?" Their dog sniffed him and gave the faintest nod. Without a word, Jim scooped his sister into his arms and placed her back into the safe room. Downstairs, the couple was still absorbed in their own world, oblivious to the looming danger. The woman excused herself to use the bathroom, glanced outside, and spotted several zombies crouched close to the window. She turned off the lights, assuming darkness would keep her hidden. Then, without warning, the door swung open. Sensing trouble, Jack grabbed his gun and rushed toward her, only to find her sprawled on the floor, lifeless and covered in blood. That was the last trace of either intruder. Upstairs, Jim and his sister returned to playing as if nothing unusual had happened. This was clearly not their first time dealing with human threats. Far away, a long-haired man trekked through the forest. He noticed several traps hidden in the snow and traced them back to the villa. Just then, a little girl appeared. Before he could react, a sting struck his neck, a tranquilizer dart. Jim had fired it. When the man regained consciousness, Jim was waiting with gun in hand. Questioning revealed the man's name, Dan, a Special Forces soldier traveling north to find his wife. Unlike others they had encountered, Dan wasn't after their food or medicine, only his weapon. Sensing an opportunity, Jim offered a deal, help him power the villa. Dan grew curious. "Where are your parents?" This time, Jim told the truth. His father, a scientist, had vanished long ago. His mother, a security agent, was on a mission and due to return soon. Dan was stunned when Jim showed him the villa's power source, a treadmill, manually operated to generate electricity. A zombie suddenly appeared outside. Dan grabbed a discus and charged out to kill it. Returning, splattered with blood, he was met with Jim's frustration. "Why kill it? These windows are bulletproof, no zombie can break in." Despite the rebuke, Dan felt pity for the siblings and willingly got on the treadmill to power the home himself. That night passed quietly. By morning, Dan was near exhaustion. Jim's sister circled him, wrinkled her nose, and declared, "You stink," before running off. She even brought him a hairpin when he went to wash up. Meanwhile, Jim went to check his traps. One had caught a lively zombie. Inside, Dan explored and found the workplace of Jim's mother. On her desk lay a photo and a car key. He dashed to the garage, but the vehicle was broken. His curiosity drew him toward a small room, but Jim stopped him sharply. After a day together, the siblings deemed Dan harmless and didn't retreat to the safe room that night. Strangely, Jim handcuffed himself before sleeping. At dawn, Dan heard footsteps outside, Jim on patrol. The zombie from the trap was still alive. Dan approached, suspecting it might be Jim's mother, and prepared to end it. Jim raised his gun, halting him. Frustrated, Dan stormed back and forced open the small room. Inside were scratch-scarred walls and a blanket, a cell for restraining zombies. His suspicion deepened. Soon, the rumble of an engine broke the stillness. Armed survivors arrived, scanning the villa. Dan stayed still, unarmed. Jim, watching from a distance, saw his sister waving from the window. Before the intruders noticed, Dan yanked her out of sight. Seeing the villa sealed tight, the attackers left. Trust cemented, Jim returned Dan's weapon. Dan suggested taking the children with him on his search for his wife. Jim refused, he was staying to await his mother. But trouble returned quickly. The gang came back, capturing Jim's sister outside. As tension built, gunshots rang out, dropping 2 robbers. Dan rescued the girl. The shooter was Jim's mother, Melanie. In the chaos, Dan was shot in the chest. He blacked out. When he awoke, his wound was gone, healed entirely. He was tied to a post, while Melanie and Jim waved to him. Inside, Melanie explained, the virus sometimes created special infected, retaining human minds but gaining zombie resilience, including miraculous healing. The drawback was frenzy, a loss of control, turning them as savage as any zombie. Dan realized he was one of them. Melanie confirmed it. Jim was, too. Years ago, in desperation, Jim's father injected him with the virus to save him from a fatal heart defect. It worked, but in frenzy, Jim had once killed, including the couple who tried to take the villa. That's why he handcuffed himself nightly. The family dog could detect frenzy before it began. The room with claw marks. Jim's frenzy chamber. Later, a white-bearded militia leader visited, searching for his runaway daughter. Melanie promised to inform him if she learned anything. That night, she told Dan about the villa's origin, one of thousands of secret, self-sustaining shelters built by the NSA in anticipation of the outbreak. Dan argued she should have warned others, but Melanie revealed the truth of Jim's father's death. Bitten by his frenzied son, he had turned and been put down by her own hand. She had been protecting her family ever since. One day, the dog barked twice. Jim was about to frenzy. Melanie locked him in, heartbreaking at his screams. Outside, the little sister suddenly collapsed, a heart attack. With no medical help, they decided to let her pass peacefully. Dan suggested infecting her to save her, but Melanie refused. After the girl's funeral, Dan chose to leave. Melanie and Jim begged him to stay, but he set out to find his wife. In the forest, Whitebeard's men found Jack's hidden car, belonging to the very people he had sought. The villa was the nearest home, so he went there. Dan, sleeping in the snow, awoke to footsteps heading that way. Alarmed, he followed. The villa was swarming with militia. Whitebeard confronted Melanie with evidence linking her to his daughter. Meanwhile, Dan slipped inside, found Jim, and learned their enemies' numbers. Then, without warning, Dan sliced his own neck, triggering frenzy. Melanie understood instantly and fled with Jim. Frenzied, Dan tore through Whitebeard's men, drawing zombies to the villa. By morning, the home was in ruins. On the table lay a letter from Melanie. She and Jim had driven north. Perhaps fate would reunite them. Dan smiled, picked up Jim's favorite doll, and began his own journey north.